Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon to wherever you are. We're just going to start our session for today. But before we get that started, I'd like to request you all to please mute your phones. And as we go and progress through the masterclass, if you have any questions, you could post your questions on the WebEx chat. We will respond to those questions at the end of the session. And we are also recording this session and we will be making it available for all the registrants once the masterclass is done. Today we are having our sixth masterclass, the AI Advantage in Deductions Processing. And our masterclass speaker, John Salek, continues to share his knowledge, experience, and insights with us. John is the president of Revenue Management Associates, an accounts receivables and order to cash consulting company. He has over 3 decades of proven experience and has been showing his performance and skills in terms of order to cash processes across a wide range of industries with over 250 clients all across. Let us now get to our masterclass started. And John, over to you without taking much of a time.
Thank you, Akshay. It's a pleasure to be here today and review this topic with you. We've got some interesting information to present today in our 30 minutes. And if you're involved with a semi-manual process to research and resolve deductions, you're going to find this information quite interesting. It's amazing at the advances that have been made, and we'll talk about that. So a quick introduction, and we'll do a high-level overview of deduction processing. What's involved? How is it done? And then we'll dive right into the artificial intelligence-powered digital automation for deduction processing. And this is the big news, and this is where the exciting advancements have been made. We'll review those with you. Then we'll share a customer success story that is had using AI-powered digital automation. Wrap it up with the conclusion, then answer any questions you might have. All right, quick introduction. Let's start with a definition. What are deductions, also known as chargebacks and short pays? They're created when a customer pays an invoice less than the full amount. And the reasons behind it are many. But when the customer doesn't feel the invoice is correct or doesn't feel the service or product that was provided is what they purchased. It can also be used as a way for a customer to collect money they feel is owed them. Wait for you to issue a payment, they just take it, deduct it to you. This is usually done with trade promotion funding. It's a quick way for the customer to realize that cash. And the processing at a very high level is quite simple. It's a binary decision. If the customer is correct in taking a deduction, it's allowed and removed from the AR ledger. If the customer is incorrect, it needs to be charged back to the customer and hopefully collected. Let's just talk about a little bit more here. It can really have a substantial impact on a company, up to 2 to 3% of the gross margin, which is actually huge. If you ever read any customer earnings releases, any company earnings releases, and that sort of thing, very often you'll see where highlighted in that earnings release is an increase in the gross margin. And this is usually the result of a concentrated effort that's taken at least a year, probably several years. And if that gross margin goes up 1 to 2%, it's heralded as a great accomplishment, and it is. Because 1 to 2% improvement on a big dollar amount is a lot of dollars. Conversely, 2 to 3% erosion of a big revenue amount is a big hit to earnings. Also, deduction processing can incur a huge productivity penalty to many departments within your company. chewing up a lot of their time. And we list the departments here, and it can be quite an impact on those departments. Can also degrade the customer experience. If they keep a statement from you that's just loaded with deductions, many of them very old, it diminishes their estimation of you as a supplier. Also makes it tough on your employees. I mean, they're just processing all these deductions, more than they can do. The backlog is high, the deductions are old, the prospects of collecting them very low. So they start saying to themselves, why am I doing this? This is a lousy job. Also can elevate your AR, both the total AR and usually the past due AR as well. And then the real damage comes when these deductions age and pile up, accumulate to very, very high dollar amounts. And as the age gets severe, very often they just have to be written off. And if it attracts the attention of the internal or external auditors and they cite it as a control issue, that's a big issue because that goes right up to the senior levels of the company and is a source of great pain and annoyance to them, particularly when there's large prior period adjustment. Years ago, I worked with a client, a very well-known name, that had to take a $28 million write-off of old deductions that had accumulated for years. And of course, when it's finally realized, it makes a pretty big impact on quarterly earnings. It raises the whole specter of inadequate internal controls, which then the CFO and senior management has to attest every quarter, if it's a publicly held company, that their internal controls are adequate and effective, and doesn't go down well. So this is a big issue, has to be handled properly. Let's take a look at this from a high level view. Our deductions can be a very low value activity. Even in the best cases, the customers write 95% of the time. The volumes can be huge, particularly in the consumer products industry. Thousands per month is not unusual, but it also affects companies in other industries as well. If there's any kind of a complex pricing mechanism, pricing scheme, you're going to see a lot of deductions. So the impact is widespread across many industries. And of course, the cost to research and resolve can be large. As one CFO once said, how many people do I want to hire to issue credit memos for valid deductions? And the point is well taken. On the surface, the payback may seem small. Even in the best cases, less than 5% of total deductions are ever recovered. So why spend a lot of time and effort on this? But if your monitoring or policing of deductions is inadequate, the problem's only going to grow because you have customers out there that abuse it. Quite honestly, they take deductions, they say, well, I'm not sure if this is really valid, but let's take it, see what happens. Well, if it's not challenged, in the future they'll take more deductions, higher volume, higher value. And so that impact on gross margin will grow. But if they're processed efficiently and effectively, there can be a nice payback there. It can be a multiple of the cost incurred in reviewing them. So what's involved in this process? Again, a simple view at a high level. Process starts when the deduction is identified, and it ends when that deduction is cleared from the AR level. The key steps in the process: creation, and that's done in cash application. Again, when a payment on an invoice is less than the full amount of the invoice. Now, typically, companies and best practice dictates that there's an automatic write-off of small balance deductions. I mean, do you really want to spend the time and effort to research a $38 deduction? Probably not. then those deductions have to be routed to the designated resolver. And the resolver is the person or department that's going to make that decision. Is this valid or invalid? And of course, if it's invalid, you route it to a collector for collection. If it is valid, you got to clear it from the AR ledger, either through a credit memo or a write-off. So kind of a simple process at a high level, but certainly performing it, individual deduction basis can get quite involved and time consuming. And the key functions are tracking. You want to track every dispute until it's cleared to avoid that $28 million write-off that I referred to earlier. Categorization is very important because this tells you what your major errors are and where the lack of quality in fulfilling orders or invoicing them comes. And that can drive improvement. Certainly when a credit is issued for a valid deduction, it has to be matched to the deduction clear. Simple, right? No fun if it's done manually though. Need to keep your eye on deductions. So operational metrics and reporting has to be done. And then as I mentioned earlier, analytics are what drive process improvement. So that's what's involved with deductions. A high level, conceptually, it probably makes sense, but as the saying goes, the devil is in details. So what can artificial intelligence powered digital automation do for deductions processing? Well, right off the bat, it can automate 70 to 80% of the manual work. And it can transform deductions processing from a costly cost center to a profit center. It can also provide a total view of all deductions. The $28 million write-off I talked about, their problem was they could never tell at any given point in time how many deductions were open, or how much, and how old they were, because they had disparate systems that weren't integrated. And of course, it can store all the documents digitally. Nice capabilities. And let's go into a little more detail here. Remember, the Cash App starts, the deduction starts in Cash Application, and that's done by extracting remittance data from your customer in multiple sources and formats to create the deductions, establish a unique record, route those deductions to the designated resolver with all the relevant information. Key part of that is extracting reason code, again, from multiple sources provided by the customer in multiple formats. And that might be the vendor portal, could be the remit advice, a debit memo, other means of communication. And then again, store the images of all the document. And this artificial intelligence powered digital automation is done called a digital assistant. And you see the image of at Emagia, their digital assistant is named Gia, and there's an image of Gia there in the lower right-hand corner. But the digital assistant performed much of the manual work in processing deductions. And this is where the value comes in, and this is where productivity can be increased 70 to 80% in most of the functions in deduction processing. So it's a big deal. Where else does this digital processing come in? In the routing. Remember, once the deduction is created, we want to route it to a resolver who will make that decision if it's valid or invalid. And typically, the resolver is selected based on the type of deduction it is. For example, if a customer makes a short payment saying the sales tax rate was wrong, well, who should that deduction go to for research and resolution? Tax department. If the deduction is based on product not being received or being received short or damaged, that probably should go to your logistics team. They can resolve it more quickly than anyone else in the company. So once that scheme is set up, we want to route those deductions automatically with a formatted message saying you've got 5, 7, 10 days to resolve it. Include all the information about the deduction, including any document images. Allow rerouting, and if there is a credit memo required, which is the majority, and it's a fairly sizable one, it can route that credit memo request through the approval hierarchy. All nice, if you're doing it manually today, nice to have a digital assistant like Gia using AI do it for you. Tracking. Remember, this was the root cause of the nightmarish $28 million write-off that I mentioned earlier. Create a deduction record at the creation stage in Cash App, and only move it to closed when it's removed from AR. Again, had a client that set up their own deduction resolution process and technology tool, and its major flaw was it was considered closed when it was resolved. Yeah, it's resolved, but if the credit memo is not issued or it's not collected from the customer, it's still open on the AR ledger. So we strongly believe resolved doesn't happen until it's cleared from the AR ledger. So the tracking is very, very important. Also, digital tracking has internal dunning, right? You've agreed as a company that a deduction has to be resolved in 7 work days. Well, the digital assistant will send a little reminder notice when 7 days comes and goes. And then there's a whole escalation protocol if the delay increases. And it can do all the reporting for you, which is very important. And we'll talk a little bit more about reporting here in a minute. So a lot of important functions here that in many companies are done manually, semi-manually, using email. Hopefully there's a workflow capability, but if there's not, then it's, emails and calendars and spreadsheets and things like that. What can the AI-powered digital automation do? What else can the digital assistant do to relieve manual work and speed up this process? Well, the small balance write-off, automatically write off those deductions and clear them automatically. If somebody has to do that manually, and you have a lot of deductions, it's going to be hard to keep up, and that's a lousy job, quite honestly. And then accumulate all these write-offs in a file and sort them by customer value, reason code, whatever. And this is what, one, helps fuel the improvement efforts in your order fulfillment and your invoicing accuracy, but also can identify some of these small balance write-offs for collections. Quick example. If you have a customer where you ship them the same order of products, same quantities every week, and every week they short pay that invoice by $98, and you see a small balance write-off, a deduction from this customer for $98 every week for months, there's a problem there. You may be overbilling them too high a price, or for some reason their payables department doesn't know the price has gone up and that you're billing them correctly. Either way, that needs to be corrected and can provide an opportunity to collect some decent money. So once the deduction's been resolved and a decision's been made that it's a valid deduction and needs to be cleared from the ledger, a credit memo or credit is issued, you want that to be done automatically by the digital assistant, not by one of your staff. and also provides a very robust query capability, which comes in mighty handy when a customer has done an audit or has hired a third-party firm to do an audit and says, oh, here's deductions we should have taken in 2017 and 2018, but forgot. But we're doing it now. So you need that query capability to respond to those. Metrics and analytics, very important too. First, the operational metrics, and this is basically input output, right? If 1,000 deductions came in this week, hopefully 1,000 have been resolved or more. You track the backlog. How big is it? What's the age? And you can track it by responsible party. So logistics is responding and resolving deductions quickly. The sales tax department is not, so we need to remind them of their responsibility. And so those metrics are very happy. And then overall, very useful. And then overall, what's the effectiveness? At the end of the day, what percent are you recovering? Hopefully that goes up over time. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the analytics. The quality analysis this is what really drives the improvement in the order fulfillment and invoicing quality. And you can use this in many ways, many sorts, usually by deduction type or by customer is the way to go. And ultimately, in most cases, you're going to identify a few customers that are big abusers of deductions. And with help from your senior management, that can be corrected. So, as we look at deductions, at a high level, it's a simple process, but improvement can drive some very nice benefits. First of all, the higher revenue and gross margin, which is pure profit. Increased productivity, which, as we said, for the manual tasks in deduction processing, which are most, productivity can run 70 to 80%. Get a better job, improve your employee morale, reduce the AR, reduce the aging, reduce the DSO, and important, improve the controls over the revenue asset valuation and reporting. Now, that may not seem like a big deal, but if you've ever had an unfavorable audit report, you know what I'm talking about. It's a nightmare. And ultimately, it does improve the customer experience. I mean, they're dealing with an accurate statement of their account. They're dealing with a supplier who's responsive and clears deductions quickly. And ultimately, it's going to free up some time in your sales and customer service departments, because inevitably they get dragged into this. And what does that all lead to? Well, improve customer experience, improve customer loyalty over time, help you to increase your share of business with individual customers, and in the aggregate, a greater market share, which all leads to increased revenue and increased profit. Share a quick customer success story. This was a global medical products company. And they decided overall their AR management just wasn't performing the way they wanted it to. And deductions were a serious problem. Global company, SAP, 30 countries, multiple languages. The solution was several Emagia AI-powered modules, deductions and cash application, which are kind of joined at the hip, right? Collections, and then the analytics modules to drive process improvement. And the value achieved in just 6 months, well, the cycle time was reduced to 5 days, which is great. You want to do that promptly. You don't want to approach a customer and say, oh, you know what, you took a deduction back in April and you were wrong. We want to collect it now. April, geez. With the cash out module, the order cash rate increased tremendously, which delivers productivity there as well. And overall, the DSO was reduced 7% in 6 months, with more to follow. I mean, significant DSO reduction occurs in months 7 through 12, and then continuous improvement in the time afterwards. So let's wrap this up real quick. We've got 5 minutes left. What's our conclusion here? And as one who's been doing this for 32 years and has seen many manual and semi-manual deduction processing scenarios, let me tell you, artificial intelligence powered digital automation with a digital assistant like Gia brings tremendous improvement. It transforms a kind of a dead end, low value activity to a high value profit one. The productivity increases huge, and a better ability to capture the root cause data. And this is what drives the improvements to the perfect order index, is the real measure of the quality of your order to cash operations. Quickly, perfect order index is the mathematical formula. It's the percent of orders that are been filled perfectly. The math behind it is the orders that have been delivered in full, correct product, on the requested due date, undamaged and no short quantities, and invoiced accurately. And it's a multiplicative fact. So you drive that perfect order index up above 85%, and you'll find your receivables improve, quote, by themselves, and certainly your deductions will go down. And the AI-powered digital automation and digital assistance can take many of these manual activities and turn them into touchless activities, which is a huge step forward. Questions?
Thanks a lot, John. Let's take a first question here. It's what percentage of invalid deductions have companies been able to recover from their customers?
Well, I've worked with over 50 companies that had significant deduction issues, and I've seen recovery approaching zero, and I've seen recovery as high as 80%. And that depends on how much time people have to pursue invalid deductions, how early they identify an invalid deduction and pursue it, and then lastly, the quality of information they have to prove that the deduction was invalid. It's a little bit like a lawyer in court trying to prove their case. Hey, Walmart, we think you deducted $18,000 incorrectly, and here's our proof and why we think that. And if you do that well and you do that quickly, you got a pretty good chance of getting most, if not all, at $18,000.
All right, John, thank you. I think the next question is more related to Gia. The question is, which parts of the end-to-end processing of deductions can AI-powered digital deductions processing automate?
Well, Gia can automate everything, all the sub-processes leading up to research and resolution, and then all the processes after that step that finalize and clear the deduction. So this involves creation of the deduction in Cash App, assigning a reason code, routing it, providing the documentation, after the research and resolution, getting approval for the credit memo, issuing the credit memo, matching the credit to the deduction and clearing it from the AR ledger. The research and resolution still requires human judgment. But boy, that can be speeded up by presenting human with all the information and documentation they need to make a fast and correct judgment.
Thanks, John. I think we are already on top of the hour over here. Just taking the last question over here. What is the value of automatic small balance write-off?
Huge, huge, because it can reduce volume tremendously. Give you one client experience that if they raise the automatic small balance write-off to $600, which, you know, can cause controllers and CFOs to shake in their boots, they could reduce the volume by 42%, but only the value of deductions by 2%. So remember, 2% of value, at best, you're only going to collect 5% of 2%, which, do the math, is a very, very small amount. Yet you have the ability to reduce volume by 42%. Now, how many processes are you running today where you have the opportunity to reduce volume by 42%? Huge. So as you can tell, I'm a big believer in maximizing the automatic small balance write-off.
Oh yeah, it does, John. We could certainly tell that. So I think we are just 1 minute more than our scheduled time, but I think it's time for us to sign up for today's masterclass, John. John and myself, Akshay, signing off today from our masterclass. But then we would certainly like to invite any of your questions. In case if you do have, please write to us at info@emagia.com. And we would like to see you for our next Emagia Masterclass session. That is on Thursday, the 3rd of December at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And the topic for our next masterclass is Digital B2B Credit Best Practices. So we look forward to seeing you out there. So please book your seat today. You can go to www.emagia.com and reserve your seat today. Thank you very much and take care.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Yeah, thanks, John.